Jake Morrison stared out the small window of his transport shuttle and tried not to throw up. Space was bigger than he had imagined, and much more empty. The stars looked like tiny dots of light scattered across a black blanket. He pressed his face against the cool glass and wondered how he had ended up here. 3 months ago, Jake had been fixing a broken fence on the Miller farm outside Columbus, Ohio. His hands were dirty from working on sick cattle, and his phone was buzzing in his back pocket. He almost didn't answer it. The voice on the other end told him he had won something called the Civilian Cultural Exchange Lottery. At first, he thought it was a scam. "You want me to go where?" Jake had asked, wiping his hands on his jeans. "To space, sir, to meet with alien representatives from the Galactic Council. You've been chosen to represent average human behavior and culture." Jake looked around at the cows standing in the muddy field. Average seemed about right. Now he sat in a shuttle heading toward a massive ship called the Harmony's Edge. The shuttle pilot, a woman named Captain Rodriguez, had tried to explain what would happen next. Jake would spend 2 weeks living with aliens from different planets. He would eat with them, talk with them, and show them what normal humans were like. "Just be yourself," Captain Rodriguez had said. "That's all they want." Jake touched the old leather bag sitting next to him. Inside were a few changes of clothes, some pictures of his family, and his grandfather's journal. The journal was filled with old recipes for helping sick animals. His grandfather had been a country veterinarian, too, back when people still called them horse doctors. The pages were yellow and soft from years of use. The shuttle shook as it connected to the big ship. Jake felt his stomach drop. Through the window, he could see the ship's hull stretching out like a metal city. Lights blinked, in patterns he didn't understand. The whole thing was bigger than his hometown. "Time to go, Dr. Morrison," Captain Rodriguez said. She had been calling him doctor, even though he had told her to just use Jake. "Your escort is waiting." The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Jake grabbed his bag and stepped through into a hallway. That looked like something from a science fiction movie. The walls were smooth and curved, glowing with a soft blue light. The air smelled clean but strange, like metal and something he couldn't name. A tall woman in a crisp blue uniform walked toward him. Her hair was pulled back tight, and she moved like someone used to being in charge. She stuck out her hand. "Dr. Morrison, I'm Ambassador Lydia Kane. Welcome aboard the Harmony's Edge." Jake shook her hand. Her grip was firm, and her smile looked practiced. "Just Jake is fine, ma'am. I'll be your guide during your stay here. I know this must all seem overwhelming, but I promise it will be fascinating." She started walking down the hallway, and Jake hurried to keep up. "I've been working with alien species for 15 years now. The key is to remember that despite their differences, most of them share basic needs and emotions. They passed through several corridors lined with doors. Jake could hear strange sounds coming from behind some of them. Musical tones, clicking noises, and what sounded like whispered conversations in languages he had never heard. "How many different aliens are on this ship?" Jake asked. "Representatives from 12 species," Ambassador Kane replied. "The Zeltharians are probably the most formal. They have very strict rules about social interaction. The Mindari are philosophers. They love to discuss deep questions about existence. The Kravek are warriors, but also poets. They speak in metaphors that can be hard to follow." Jake nodded, though he was already feeling lost. He was used to dealing with farmers who spoke plain English and animals that communicated through body language. This was going to be harder than treating a cranky bull. They stopped at a door marked with symbols Jake couldn't read. Ambassador Kane pressed her hand against a panel, and the door slid open. "These are your quarters," she said. "They're designed to feel comfortable for humans. You have a private bathroom, a bed, and a desk. Meals are served in the common dining area 3 times a day. Ship time." The room was small but clean. The bed looked normal enough, and there was a window showing the stars outside. Jake set his bag on the desk. "I have to ask," Ambassador Kane said. "What made you bring that old journal?" Jake touched the leather cover. "It was my grandfather's. He taught me most of what I know about taking care of animals. I thought I figured if these aliens have pets or something, I might be able to help if they get sick." Ambassador Kane's expression changed. She looked worried. "Jake, I need to warn you about something. There are very strict rules about medical treatment between species. The non-interference doctrine prohibits any being from providing medical care to a creature from another species. It's been galactic law for thousands of years. But what if an animal is suffering? The law exists to prevent accidental harm. Different species have different biology. What helps one might kill another." She put her hand on his shoulder. "I know you want to help, but please don't try to treat any alien creatures you might see. It could create a diplomatic incident." Jake nodded, but something inside him disagreed. He had never been able to walk away from a sick animal, no matter what kind it was. His grandfather had taught him that suffering was suffering, whether it belonged to a cow, a dog, or something he had never seen before. After Ambassador Kane left, Jake unpacked his few belongings. He put his family photos on the desk and placed his grandfather's journal next to them. Through his window, he could see other ships moving slowly through space like metal fish swimming in an ocean of stars. Tomorrow, he would meet his first aliens. He had no idea that his simple desire to help sick creatures would change everything, not just for him, but for every living being in the galaxy. He was just a veterinarian from Ohio who had won a lottery. He never wanted to be a hero. But sometimes, heroes are made by accident, one small act of kindness at a time. Jake's first breakfast on the Harmony's Edge was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The dining hall was huge, with tables shaped like crescents and circles instead of rectangles. Beings he had only seen in movies sat together, eating foods that looked like nothing from Earth. Ambassador Kane guided him to a table where 3 humans sat with what appeared to be a tall, thin creature covered in silver scales. The creature had 4 arms and eyes that changed color as it looked around the room. "Jake, meet Zix Plural 7, the ship's Zeltharian medical officer," Ambassador Kane said. Zix Plural 7 extended one of its 4 hands. Jake shook it carefully. The skin felt cool and smooth like touching a snake. "I am pleased to meet you, human Jake Morrison," the alien said. Its voice sounded like wind chimes. "I have heard you care for creatures on your planet." "Yes, sir." "Ma'am." Yes, I'm a veterinarian." What is this word, veterinarian? Jake looked at Ambassador Kane, who nodded encouragingly. "I take care of sick and hurt animals. I help them feel better when they're in pain." Zix Plural 7's eyes shifted from blue to green. "This is interesting. On Zeltharia, we have sacred creatures called memory keepers. They live with us and share our thoughts, but one of mine is not well." Before Ambassador Kane could stop him, Jake leaned forward. "What's wrong with it?" "It sleeps too much. It will not eat. Its fur loses color and falls out." Zix Plural 7's eyes turned dark purple. "I fear it will join the Great Silence soon." Jake knew that look. He had seen it on farmers' faces when their favorite animals were dying. "Could I see it? Maybe I could— Absolutely not, Ambassador Kane said quickly. Jake, remember what we discussed yesterday? The non-interference doctrine. But if it's suffering, Zix plural 7 tilted its head. You would wish to help a creature not of your species? Of course. Pain is pain. Doesn't matter what kind of animal feels it. The dining hall had grown quiet around them. Other aliens at nearby tables were listening. Ambassador Kane looked nervous. This is not possible, said a voice from behind them. Jake turned to see a creature that looked like a walking tree, with bark-like skin and leaves instead of hair. The law is clear. No being may provide medical treatment to another species' companion. But what if the treatment works? Jake asked. What if I could help? The tree-like being's leaves rustled. The law exists for good reason, young human. Many have died from well-intentioned interference. After breakfast, Jake couldn't stop thinking about the memory keeper. He had seen that same listless behavior in dozens of farm animals. Usually it meant something simple was wrong: bad food, not enough vitamins, or parasites. But without examining the creature, he couldn't be sure. Ambassador Kane found him in his room that afternoon, reading his grandfather's journal. Jake, I can see you're worried about that creature, but you have to understand the position you're in. You represent all of humanity here. If you break galactic law, it could hurt relationships between Earth and the rest of the galaxy. Jake looked up from the journal. What if we just asked? What if Zix plural 7 wanted me to look at the memory keeper? It's still illegal. The law doesn't care about consent. That evening, Jake was walking through one of the ship's garden areas when he heard a soft crying sound. He followed the noise down a side corridor and found Zix plural 7 sitting on the floor next to an open door. Inside the room, Jake could see a creature about the size of a large dog lying on a soft bed. It had 6 legs, silver fur, and was breathing very slowly. It will not wake, Zix plural 7 said without looking up. For 3 days now, it only sleeps. Jake knelt down next to the alien. Have you tried changing its food? We have tried everything. Our best healers say there is nothing more to do. Jake looked at the memory keeper. Its fur was patchy and dull. Its breathing was shallow. He had seen this exact condition in sheep back home. Can I touch it? Zix plural 7's eyes went from purple to bright yellow. You would risk punishment for a creature you do not know? I can't just watch it suffer. After a long moment, Zix plural 7 nodded. If you are discovered, I will say I forced you. Jake gently placed his hands on the memory keeper's side. Its body felt too warm, and he could feel its ribs through the thin fur. He lifted one of its eyelids and saw that the inside was pale instead of pink. He pressed on its gums. They were white. I think it has anemia, Jake said. Not enough iron in its blood. What do you feed it? Processed nutrition pellets, like all companion creatures. Jake pulled out his grandfather's journal and flipped through the pages. Here, he said, pointing to a faded entry. My grandfather wrote about sheep with the same problem. They need iron supplements and better food. We do not have iron supplements. For memory keepers. Jake thought for a moment. What about your food? Do Zeltharians need iron? Yes, but our supplements would be too strong. What if we mixed a tiny amount into its food? Just a little bit each day? Zix plural 7 was quiet for a long time. Finally, it said, This could kill it. It's going to die anyway if we don't try. They worked together for the next hour. Jake crushed a small piece of Zeltharian iron supplement and mixed it with water. And soft food. He showed Zix Plural 7 how to force-feed the mixture to the memory keeper using a small tube. "Do this twice a day," Jake said, "and try to get it to walk around the room even if it doesn't want to. Exercise helps the blood move." 3 days later, Zix Plural 7 found Jake in the dining hall. The alien's eyes were bright gold, and its 4 hands were trembling with excitement. "Human Jake Morrison, you must come see." They hurried to the memory keeper's room. The creature was standing up, its fur shinier than before. When it saw Zix Plural 7, it made a happy chirping sound and ran over on all 6 legs. "It is well," Zix Plural 7 said. "Better than it has been in many cycles." Word spread quickly through the ship. By evening, other aliens were approaching Jake quietly, asking if he could look at their companion creatures. A Kravek warrior named Blade Singer of Dawn brought her battle companion, a reptile-like creature with scales that had turned gray and flaky. A Mindari philosopher wanted help with a floating jellyfish thing that had stopped glowing. Ambassador Kane found out when she saw Jake in the ship's medical bay, treating the Kravek's battle companion with what looked like a homemade ointment. "Jake, what are you doing?" He looked up from rubbing the ointment on the creature's scales. "Helping. This guy just has dry skin. Back home, we use this same mixture on horses." "You're breaking galactic law. I'm helping sick animals." Captain Thoughtwalker Between Stars, the ship's Mindari commander, appeared in the doorway. The alien looked like a tall, thin human with silver skin and no hair. Its large black eyes showed no emotion. "There is a problem," the captain said. "The Galactic Council has received reports of illegal medical activity on this ship. Enforcement officers are coming to arrest human Jake Morrison." Ambassador Kane turned pale. "How long do we have?" "They will arrive in 2 ship days," Jake continued, rubbing ointment on the battle companion's scales. The creature purred like a giant cat. "Will this get anyone else in trouble?" "The law is clear," Captain Thoughtwalker Between Stars said. "You acted alone, but the crew wishes to protect you." "Why?" The captain's expression might have been a smile. "Because you have done something impossible. You have helped creatures from 5 different species, all successfully. In 3,000 years of galactic history, this has never happened." Jake looked around the room. Zix Plural 7 stood in the corner with its healthy memory keeper. Blade Singer of Dawn watched. Her battle companion's scales returned to their natural bright green. The Mindari philosopher held its glowing jellyfish companion, which now pulsed with soft rainbow colors. He had never wanted to break any laws. He had just wanted to help sick animals feel better. But now he was learning that sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking the wrong rules. The question was, what would happen when the enforcement officers arrived? Something strange was happening to the animals Jake had treated. It started with Zix Plural 7's memory keeper. "It is speaking," the Zeltharian told Jake in wonder. They stood in the observation room, watching the silver-furred creature through the window. Not just feeling talk like before, real words in old Zeltharian language. Jake watched the memory keeper pace around its room. The creature moved differently now, with purpose and intelligence. Its eyes seemed brighter, more aware. What's it saying? Ancient stories. Histories my people thought were lost forever. Stories. From before we joined the galaxy. Zix Plural 7's 4 hands pressed against the glass. How does it know these things? Jake shook his head. I just gave it iron supplements and better food. Animals sometimes get smarter when they feel better, but this, The memory keeper looked directly at them through the window and spoke in a voice like singing bells. Zix Plural 7 gasped. "It says thank you, human Jake Morrison. It says you have awakened the sleeping mind." Dr. Lisa Carter, the ship's human xenobiologist, had been documenting everything Jake did. She was a serious woman with short brown hair and thick glasses who took notes on everything. She found Jake in the garden area later that day. "I need to show you something," she said, pulling out her electronic tablet. "The brain scans of the creatures you've treated. Look at this." The screen showed colorful images that looked like maps of light. Jake didn't understand most of it, but even he could see the difference between the before and after pictures. "Their neural activity has increased by 300%, Dr. Carter explained. "Not just intelligence, emotional capacity, memory, function, even telepathic abilities where the species has them." "I don't understand. I just treated them for basic health problems." "That's what makes this so incredible. Your treatments aren't just healing their bodies, they're enhancing their minds." Blade Singer of Dawn's battle companion had changed the most dramatically. The reptilian creature, which the Kravek called a flame heart, now moved with fluid grace instead of the clumsy shuffle it had before. More importantly, the bond between warrior and companion had grown stronger than anyone had ever seen. Jake watched them practice combat forms in the ship's training area. Blade Singer of Dawn would think about a move, and her Flameheart would react before she even moved. They flowed together like dancers, perfectly synchronized. "We are one mind in two bodies now," Blade Singer of Dawn told Jake afterward. Her Flameheart sat beside her, its golden eyes never leaving her face. "In all Kravek history, such a bond has never been achieved." "How is that possible?" "You healed more than its skin scales, human Jake. You healed the connection between our spirits." The Mindari philosopher's companion had undergone the most beautiful change. The jellyfish-like creature now glowed with patterns that matched its owner's thoughts. When the philosopher contemplated deep questions, the creature pulsed with complex geometric designs. When it felt happy, the creature sparkled like stars. "It has become a living meditation," the philosopher told Jake. "Through its light, I can see my own thoughts made visible. This is a gift beyond measure." But the changes were causing problems. News of Jake's enhancements had spread throughout the ship, and not everyone was happy about it. "This is unnatural," declared Branch that reaches skyward, the tree-like being Jake had met on his first day. "These creatures were not meant to have such abilities. You are disrupting the natural order." A group of conservative aliens had gathered in the main meeting room to discuss what they called the human problem. Jake stood before them, still, wearing his simple clothes and work boots, feeling very out of place among beings who looked like they belonged in a fantasy movie. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," Jake said. "I just wanted to help sick animals." "But you have done more than help," said a crystalline being whose voice sounded like ice cracking. "You have changed them, enhanced them, made them into something they were not before." Ambassador Kane stood beside Jake, looking as worried as he felt. Dr. Morrison's intentions were purely humanitarian. He saw suffering and tried to alleviate it. "The road to chaos is paved with good intentions," Branch that reaches skyward replied. "What happens when word of this spreads? Every species will demand these enhancements for their companions. The balance of power across the galaxy could shift." Captain Thoughtwalker Between Stars entered the room at that moment, his silver face showing no emotion. "We have received a priority message from the Galactic Council. The enforcement ships will arrive in 6 hours. Good, said the crystalline being. This human will face justice for his violations. There is more, the captain continued. The council has learned of the enhancements. They are sending not just enforcement officers, but also scientific observers and legal experts. This has become a matter of galactic importance. Jake felt his stomach drop. He had never wanted any of this attention. He just wanted to go home to Ohio and take care of farm animals that didn't glow or speak in ancient languages. But then Zix Plural 7 entered the room, followed by its memory keeper. The silver-furred creature walked with dignity and purpose, its eyes bright with intelligence. I wish to speak, the memory keeper said in perfect galactic common language. Everyone in the room fell silent. Companion creatures did not speak at council meetings. They did not have rights under galactic law. I am keeper of forgotten songs, the creature continued. For many cycles I lived in shadow sleep, my mind clouded by illness. Human Jake Morrison brought me back to the light. He gave me not just health, but awakening. The crystalline being's voice turned harsh. Creatures do not speak in council. Then perhaps it is time for the law to change, said Blade Singer of Dawn, entering with her flame heart beside her. My companion and I now share one warrior spirit. We are stronger together than either could be alone. The Mindari philosopher glided in next, its glowing companion floating beside it like a living rainbow. Through healing, this human has shown us new possibilities for consciousness itself. Jake looked around the room in amazement. The aliens he had helped were standing up for him. But that wasn't the most surprising part. Their companion creatures were standing with them as equals, speaking with their own voices. This is unprecedented, Captain Thoughtwalker Between Stars observed. In galactic history, no companion creature has ever addressed a formal gathering. Dr. Carter stepped forward, holding her tablet. According to my research, Dr. Morrison's treatments don't just enhance the creature's abilities. They create permanent bonds that benefit both species. The Zeltharian and its memory keeper now share memories. The Kravek and Flameheart share reflexes and instincts. The Mindari and its companions share thought patterns. But how? Asked Branch that reaches skyward. Jake pulled out his grandfather's journal. The old leather book looked tiny in his hands compared to all the advanced technology around him. My grandfather wrote about treating the whole animal, not just the sickness, Jake said. Body, mind, and spirit together. I guess when you heal something completely, you heal the connections too. The memory keeper spoke again. Human Jake Morrison sees no difference between himself and those he heals. To him, suffering is suffering. Pain is pain. This openness allows him to touch the deeper connections that bind all living things. The enforcement ships arrived as scheduled, but they found something no one expected. The crew of the Harmony's Edge refused to surrender Jake. Zeltharians, Kravek, Mindari, and a dozen other species stood together, protecting a simple veterinarian from Ohio who had accidentally changed everything. Captain Thoughtwalker Between Stars made a decision that would be remembered in galactic history. I declare this ship a neutral zone, he announced. We will not surrender human Jake Morrison until the Galactic Council hears all evidence. This matter is too important for hasty judgment. Jake sat in his small room that night, looking out at the stars. He could hear the enforcement ships moving around outside, waiting. Tomorrow, the most powerful beings in the galaxy would decide his fate. He opened his grandfather's journal and read the first entry. Remember, boy, healing isn't about following rules. It's about seeing what's broken and fixing it with whatever you have. Jake smiled. His grandfather would have understood perfectly. The Harmony's edge had never held so many important beings at once. Ships from 47 different species surrounded the vessel like metal birds circling prey. Inside, the main assembly hall had been transformed into the largest courtroom. In galactic history, Jake sat at a simple table in the center of the room, still wearing his work clothes and boots. Around him, beings that looked like they came from dreams and nightmares filled every seat. Some glowed with their own light. Others seemed to be made of living shadow. A few didn't appear to have physical bodies at all. This is the most irregular. Proceeding in Council history, announced High Arbiter Vex Prime Alpha, a towering creature that looked like it was carved from black stone. We are here to determine the fate of one human who has violated fundamental galactic law. Ambassador Kane sat beside Jake, whispering advice he could barely hear over the sound of his own heartbeat. Dr. Carter sat behind them with her research files, ready to present evidence. But Jake felt very alone in the middle of all those alien eyes. Human Jake Morrison, the High Arbiter continued. You stand accused of violating the Non-Interference Doctrine, the Medical Sovereignty Act, and the Species Purity Protocol. How do you answer? Jake stood up slowly. His legs felt shaky. I helped some sick animals feel better. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some sounded approving. Others sounded angry. The accused admits to the violations, said Prosecutor Zek Final Word, a crystalline being whose voice cut through the room like breaking glass. The law is clear. Medical interference between species is forbidden. The penalty is exile to the void regions. Jake didn't know what the void regions were, but they didn't sound pleasant. However, the High Arbiter said, this case involves unprecedented circumstances. The accused will be permitted to explain his actions before judgment is rendered. Jake looked out at the sea of alien faces. He thought about prepared speeches Ambassador Kane had tried to teach him, about diplomatic language and legal terms. Instead, he pulled out his grandfather's journal. My grandfather was a veterinarian, Jake began. He taught me that when you see something suffering, you help it. Doesn't matter if it's a cow or a dog or a cat. Pain is pain. He opened the journal to a page near the middle. He wrote here about a horse that was dying. The owner wanted to put it down, said it was hopeless. But my grandfather saw that the horse just had a bad infection. He treated it with simple medicine, and the horse lived for 15 more years. Jake looked up at the High Arbiter. I didn't know there were laws against helping sick animals. Where I come from, it's what good people do. Prosecutor Zek Final Word's crystalline body flashed with harsh light. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. These protocols exist because medical interference has caused disasters. The plague of Marin Prime, the consciousness virus of Keltar 7. Entire civilizations have fallen because well-meaning beings tried to help other species. But what if the help works? Jake asked. What if nobody gets hurt and everybody feels better? That is not the point. The law may be wrong, interrupted a new voice. Everyone turned to see Keeper of Forgotten Songs enter the assembly hall. The Memory Keeper walked with dignity, its silver fur shining under the lights. Behind it came Blade Singer of Dawn's Flameheart, the Mindari philosopher's glowing companion, and a dozen other enhanced creatures. The High Arbiter's stone features showed surprise. Companion creatures are not permitted in formal proceedings. Then, perhaps, said Keeper of Forgotten Songs, it is time to change that law as well. The creature moved to the center of the room, standing beside Jake. I was dying when human Jake Morrison found me. My mind was clouded, my memories fading. He gave me back my life and my purpose. Through his healing, I remembered songs my people thought lost forever. The Flameheart stepped forward next. Its golden scales rippled with inner fire. I was weak and disconnected from my warrior partner. Now we are one spirit in two bodies. Our bond makes us both stronger. One by one, the enhanced companions spoke. They told of abilities awakened, connections deepened, and purposes discovered. Their words carried weight that surprised everyone. In the room, including Jake, Dr. Carter stood up and activated a holographic display. The evidence shows that Dr. Morrison's treatments created permanent beneficial changes. Neural activity increased, emotional capacity expanded, telepathic abilities strengthened where they existed naturally. The display showed brain scans, behavioral studies, and genetic analyses. Jake didn't understand most of it, but he could see that the before and after pictures looked very different. More importantly, Dr. Carter continued, there have been no negative side effects, no illness, no psychological damage, no species contamination. The enhanced companions are healthier and happier than they were before. This means nothing, Prosecutor Zek Final Word declared. The law exists to prevent disaster, not to judge results. Even successful violations must be punished, or chaos will follow. High Arbiter Vex Prime Alpha was quiet for a long moment. The prosecution makes a valid point. Law cannot be set aside simply because violations produce good results. Jake felt his heart sink. But then a small voice spoke from the back of the room. May I address the assembly? Everyone turned to see a young Zeltharian, smaller and more brightly colored than Zix Plural 7, walking toward the center. Its eyes shifted through rainbow colors as it moved. I am Zix Plural 12, the young alien said. I speak for the Progressive Council faction. The High Arbiter nodded. You may speak. Honored beings, we face a choice. We can punish this human for breaking old laws, or we can learn from what he has accomplished. Zix Plural 12's eyes settled on a warm gold color. For 3,000 years, our laws have kept the species separate, but perhaps separation is not always wisdom. The young Zeltharian gestured toward the enhanced companions. These creatures show us new possibilities, not domination by one species over another, but partnership, not interference, but cooperation. Dangerous thinking, muttered Branch that reaches skyward from his seat. Is it? Zix Plural 12 asked. This human has achieved something our greatest scientists thought impossible. He has created interspecies bonds that benefit everyone involved. Should we punish such achievement? Blade Singer of Dawn stood up. On Kravek, we have a saying, the warrior who creates new paths deserves honor, not punishment. This human has shown us a new path. The Mindari philosopher rose next. Logic suggests that laws which prevent beneficial progress may themselves be flawed. Captain Thoughtwalker. Between Stars spoke from his position near the door. In my years of command, I have learned that the most important decisions often require courage to change old ways. Jake watched as more and more beings began to speak in his favor. Not just the ones whose companions he had treated, but others who had observed the results. Even some who had initially opposed him seemed to be reconsidering. High Arbiter Vex Prime Alpha raised a stone hand for silence. This assembly will recess for deliberation. The decision will be announced at the next solar period. As the crowd began to disperse, Keeper of Forgotten Songs approached Jake. You are worried, human Jake Morrison. I just wanted to help sick animals, Jake said quietly. I never meant to cause all this trouble. Perhaps, the memory keeper replied. The best gifts are the ones we give without thinking about what we will receive in return. Jake spent that night in his room, looking out at the stars and thinking about home. He missed the simple problems of farm animals and the quiet countryside of Ohio. But when he looked at his grandfather's journal, he realized something important. His grandfather had faced the same choice once: follow the rules or help a suffering creature. The old veterinarian had chosen to help, even when others said it was hopeless. Now Jake faced the same choice on a galactic scale. Whatever the council decided, he knew he had done the right thing. Sometimes the most important laws were the ones written in the heart, not in books. The next day would bring answers. But tonight, Jake was at peace with his decision. The assembly hall fell silent as High Arbiter Vex Prime Alpha took his position at the center podium. Jake sat in his chair, hands folded, trying to look calm while his heart hammered against his ribs. 47 different species waited to hear his fate. The council has reached a decision, the High Arbiter announced. His voice carried to every corner of the massive room. But first, we must acknowledge that this case has revealed fundamental questions about our laws and their purpose. Jake glanced at Ambassador Kane, who gave him what she probably thought was an encouraging smile. Dr. Carter squeezed his shoulder from behind. The evidence shows that human Jake Morrison violated 3 major galactic statutes, the High Arbiter continued. The Non-Interference Doctrine, the Medical Sovereignty Act, the Species Purity Protocol. These violations cannot be disputed. Prosecutor Zek's final words' crystalline body glowed with satisfaction. However, the High Arbiter said, and the word seemed to echo through the room, the results of these violations have been entirely beneficial. No harm has come to any being. Instead, unprecedented advances in interspecies cooperation have been achieved. Jake felt a tiny spark of hope. The council has debated for many hours. Some believe that law must be absolute, that even beneficial violations must be punished to maintain order. Others argue that laws which prevent beneficial progress serve no useful purpose. The High Arbiter paused, looking around the room. We find ourselves at a crossroads. Do we uphold tradition, or do we embrace change? Zix Plural 12 stood up in the audience. Honored Arbiter, may I present an alternative? You may speak. The young Zeltharian walked to the center of the ice room, its eyes shifting through colors Jake had learned meant deep thought. What if this human's actions were not violations but discoveries? What if he has shown us that our laws need to evolve? Explain, the High Arbiter said. I propose the creation of the Accidental Diplomacy Initiative, Zix Plural 12 announced. A new legal framework that acknowledges that some of our greatest advances come not from careful planning, but from unexpected discoveries. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some sounded interested, others sounded skeptical. This human did not set out to break our laws, Zix Plural 12 continued. He set out to reduce suffering. The fact that his actions produced beneficial results suggests that our laws may be preventing positive progress. Branch that reaches. Skyward S leaves rustled with disapproval. You cannot simply ignore established law because you like the outcome. I'm not suggesting we ignore law, Zix Plural 12 replied. I am suggesting we create new law that allows for beneficial exceptions under careful oversight. Dr. Carter stood up. If I may, honored beings, my research shows that Dr. Morrison's methods could be adapted for other species combinations. With proper study and safeguards, we could develop protocols for beneficial interspecies medical cooperation. Jake watched the debate swirl around him. Beings argued about precedent and procedure, about risk and reward. But all he could think about was Keeper of Forgotten songs, healthy and happy, and singing ancient stories. About Blade Singer of Dawn and her Flameheart moving together like they shared one soul. About all the suffering he had helped ease. Finally, he stood up. "Can I say something?" The room fell quiet. High Arbiter Vex Prime Alpha nodded. "I don't understand all the legal stuff," Jake said. "But I understand suffering. When I see an animal in pain, I help it. That's what my grandfather taught me, and that's what feels right." He pulled out the old journal and held it up. "This book is full of stories about helping creatures others said couldn't be helped. My grandfather never asked if it was legal. He asked if it was right." Jake looked around the room at all the alien faces watching him. "Maybe your laws were written by people who were scared of making mistakes. But sometimes the biggest mistake is not trying to help when you can." He sat back down, feeling like he had said too much or too little. But Keeper of Forgotten Songs walked over and stood beside his chair, offering silent support. High Arbiter Vex Prime Alpha was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. "The Council has decided. Human Jake Morrison, your violations of galactic law cannot be ignored. However, the beneficial nature of your actions and the unprecedented results you achieved warrant special consideration." Jake's mouth went dry. "Therefore, the Council issues the following judgment. You are found guilty of violating galactic statute, but your sentence is suspended pending the establishment of new legal frameworks for beneficial interspecies cooperation." The room erupted in voices, some cheering, others protesting. The High Arbiter raised his hand for silence. Furthermore, the Council hereby establishes the Morrison Amendment to Galactic Law, allowing for carefully monitored cross-species medical cooperation in cases where traditional methods have failed and qualified experts determine the risk to be minimal. Jake blinked in surprise. They were naming a law after him? "Finally," the High Arbiter continued, "we create the position of Accidental Ambassador, a new diplomatic role for individuals whose unofficial actions benefit galactic relations. Human Jake Morrison, you are appointed as the first holder of this position." Ambassador Kane leaned over and whispered, "Jake, do you understand what this means? You're not going to prison. You're being given a job." But Jake was looking at something else. All around the room, the enhanced companion creatures were standing with their partners. Zeltharians with memory keepers, Kravek with flame hearts, Mindari with their glowing companions. They stood together as equals, as partners, as friends. "What would this job involve?" Jake asked. "You would return to Earth," the High Arbiter explained, "but you would also establish the first interspecies veterinary institute. Beings from across the galaxy could bring their companion creatures to you for treatment. Your methods would be studied and taught to others." Jake thought about going home to Ohio, but not to his old life. Instead, he would be creating something new, something that brought beings together instead of keeping them apart. "I accept," he said simply. 6 months later, Jake stood in a field outside Columbus, Ohio, watching the construction of the Interspecies Veterinary Institute. The building looked like nothing Earth had ever seen before, with sections designed for beings of all shapes and sizes. Zeltharian healing pools sat next to Kravek combat training areas. Mindari meditation chambers were built alongside simple examination rooms that reminded Jake of his old veterinary clinic. Ambassador Kane found him there, looking over the construction plans. "Any regrets?" she asked. Jake shook his head. "My grandfather always said the best medicine comes from understanding that everything is connected. I guess I just needed to learn that on a bigger scale." A transport ship landed in the nearby field, and Jake watched as Zix Plural 7 emerged with a group of young Zeltharians eager to learn his techniques. Behind them came Blade Singer of Dawn, with several Kravek warriors and their companions. "The first class of interspecies veterinary students," Ambassador Kane observed. Jake smiled and walked toward the ship, his grandfather's journal tucked under his arm. He had never wanted to be a hero or a revolutionary. He had just wanted to help sick animals feel better. But sometimes the most important changes in the universe start with the simplest acts of kindness. Sometimes a veterinarian from Ohio can accidentally reshape galactic law by refusing to walk away from suffering. As Jake greeted his new students, Keeper of Forgotten Songs sang an ancient song about healers who bridged the gaps between worlds. The melody carried across the Ohio countryside, mixing with the sounds of earth birds and alien voices, creating something entirely new. The galaxy had changed forever, one act of accidental compassion at a time. 2 years had passed since the Interspecies Veterinary Institute opened its doors in the Ohio countryside. Jake walked through the main treatment facility, checking on his patients before the morning staff meeting. The building hummed with activity. That would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. In the Zeltharian wing, 3 memory keepers played together in a specially designed pool filled with mineral-rich water. Their silver fur gleamed as they dove and surfaced, chattering in musical voices that mixed ancient Zeltharian with English words they had learned from Jake. Their partners, young Zeltharian healers studying Jake's methods, watched with pride and wonder. "Good morning, Keeper of First Dawn," Jake said to the smallest memory keeper. The creature swam over and gently touched Jake's hand with its nose. "Morning greetings, human Jake," it replied in its bell-like voice. "The new students arrived today, yes?" "That's right. Beings from 6 new species want to learn how to help their companions feel better." The memory keeper's eyes brightened. "This is good, happy news. More healing means less sadness in the Star Ocean." Jake smiled at the poetic way the enhanced creatures had begun speaking. They mixed practical thoughts with beautiful imagery in ways that made even simple conversations feel special. In the Kravek training area, Blade Singer of Dawn worked with a group of warrior students and their flame hearts. The reptilian companions moved in perfect harmony with their partners, demonstrating the deep bonds that Jake's treatments had made possible. But today, something new was happening. "Human Jake," Blade Singer of Dawn called out, "come see what Thunder in the Distance has learned." Jake approached the training mat where a young Kravek warrior named Swift River Running stood with her flame heart, companion. The reptilian creature, Thunder in the Distance, was demonstrating something Jake had never seen before. The flame heart was glowing, not with the usual golden scales, but with actual light that pulsed in patterns along its body. As Swift River Running moved through combat forms, Thunder in the Distance's light patterns predicted her movements, creating a beautiful display of synchronized motion and luminescence. "How is this possible?" Jake asked. "The bond has grown deeper," Blade Singer of Dawn explained. "Thunder in the Distance now shares not just Swift River Running's thoughts, but her life energy itself. They have become something new." Dr. Carter appeared at Jake's elbow, tablet in hand as always. "I've been documenting these new developments. The enhanced companions aren't just maintaining their improved abilities, they're continuing to evolve. She showed Jake her latest research data. The neural connections between partners are strengthening over time. In some cases, they're developing abilities that neither species possessed individually. Jake studied the charts and graphs, though much of the technical information still went over his head. Is this dangerous? Not that I can tell. If anything, the partners are becoming healthier and more stable. It's like they're becoming more than the sum of their parts. In the Mindari meditation chambers, Jake found an even more remarkable development. The floating jellyfish-like companions had learned to create shared light patterns that multiple Mindari could interpret simultaneously. What had started as individual meditation aids had become a form of group consciousness. We are learning to think together, explained Harmony Seeker Through Void, one of the Mindari philosophers. Through our companion's light, we share not just thoughts, but understanding itself. The glowing companions floated in a circle above their partners, pulsing with synchronized patterns that looked like living galaxies. Jake watched in amazement, as the Mindari below sat in perfect stillness, their large black eyes reflecting the light show above. Your healing gift has given us more than enhanced companions, Harmony Seeker Through Void continued. You have shown us new ways to connect across the spaces between minds. Jake left the meditation chamber feeling both proud and worried. The changes he had accidentally started were growing beyond anything he had imagined. As he walked toward his office, he found Ambassador Kane waiting for him with a serious expression. "We need to talk," she said. They sat in Jake's simple office, which still looked more like a farm veterinarian's workspace than a galactic research facility. His grandfather's journal lay open on the desk next to modern alien medical equipment that Jake was still learning to use. "The Galactic Council is asking questions," Ambassador Kane began. "The reports coming from your institute are unprecedented. Some beings are calling it the next step in evolution. Others are worried about uncontrolled change." Jake poured 2 cups of coffee from the old machine he had brought from his previous clinic. "What kind of questions?" "They want to know if these developments can be controlled or reversed. Some species are demanding access to your treatments for military purposes. Others want them banned completely." "I'm not doing anything different than I did on the ship," Jake protested. "I just help sick animals feel better. But the results keep changing. The enhanced companions are developing new abilities faster than we can study them." Ambassador Kane pulled out her own tablet and showed Jake a series of reports. A Kravek flame heart in the outer rim system started glowing, like the ones here, even though it was never treated by you. A Zeltharian memory keeper on their home world began speaking in languages it never learned. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "You think it's spreading?" "Dr. Carter thinks the enhanced companions are somehow sharing their improvements with others of their kind. Not through physical contact, but through some kind of quantum entanglement that we don't understand." Before Jake could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Through his office window, he could see ships landing in the fields outside, not the usual peaceful transports, but military vessels with weapons visible on their hulls. "What's happening?" Jake asked. Ambassador Kane checked her communication device. "Emergency council session. They're evacuating the institute." "Evacuating? Why?" "Because 3 hours ago, every enhanced companion creature in the galaxy started glowing at the same time. Not just the ones you treated directly, but all of them, even ones that have never been anywhere near Earth." Jake stared out the window as beings ran toward the landing ships. In the distance, He could see Keeper of Forgotten Songs leading the other memory keepers toward safety, their silver fur shining with an inner light he had never seen before. "I don't understand," Jake said quietly. "I just wanted to help sick animals." "I know," Ambassador Kane replied, "but I think you've accidentally done something much bigger than that. Something that's changing every enhanced creature in the galaxy simultaneously." As they prepared to evacuate, Jake grabbed his grandfather's journal. Whatever was happening, he had the feeling he was going to need the old wisdom more than ever. The simple act of healing sick animals had started something that was spreading across the entire galaxy. The question now was whether it was a gift or a catastrophe, and whether Jake could find a way to control what he had accidentally unleashed. Upon the stars, the emergency transport ship felt cramped with so many different species crowded together. Jake sat near a window, watching Earth grow smaller below them as they headed toward the massive council station orbiting the moon. Around him, beings, whispered in dozens of languages, their voices mixing worry with wonder. Keeper of Forgotten Songs, curled up next to Jake's feet, its silver fur still glowing with the soft light that had appeared 3 hours ago. The memory keeper hadn't spoken since the glow began, but its large eyes remained alert and thoughtful. "Any word from the other institutes?" Dr. Carter asked Ambassador Kane, who was trying to coordinate with officials across the galaxy using a communication device that looked more complicated than Jake's old truck engine. "Reports are coming in from everywhere," Ambassador Kane replied, her face pale with stress. Every enhanced companion creature in the galaxy started glowing at exactly the same time. Not just the ones treated directly by Jake, but all of them. Even the offspring of enhanced creatures that were born after treatment. Jake stroked Keeper of Forgotten Songs' glowing fur. It felt warm but not hot, like touching sunlight made solid. "Are they in pain?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Dr. Carter said, checking her tablet. "The vital signs I'm getting from our creatures show elevated neural activity, but no distress. If anything, they seem calmer than usual." Through the ship's speakers, Captain Martinez announced their arrival at the council station. Jake had never seen anything so large. The station looked like a metal city floating in space, with docking bays that could hold ships the size of skyscrapers. Thousands of vessels surrounded it, all carrying enhanced creatures and their worried partners from across the galaxy. The main assembly hall had been converted into a massive medical monitoring center. Beings in white coats moved between examination stations where enhanced creatures from dozens of species lay on specialized beds connected to monitoring equipment. The air hummed with electronic beeps and the quiet conversations of scientists, trying to understand what was happening. Jake found himself assigned to Station 7, where Keeper of Forgotten Songs was gently placed on a soft platform surrounded by scanning devices. Dr. Carter worked alongside a team of xenobiologists, while Jake held the memory keeper's paw and tried to look reassuring. "The neural activity is incredible," Dr. Carter murmured, studying the readouts. "It's like their brains are running at 3 times normal capacity, but without any signs of strain or damage." Nearby, Blade Singer of Dawn sat with Thunder in the distance, whose reptilian scales pulsed with patterns of light that seemed to match similar patterns on flame hearts throughout the hall. The Kravek warrior looked concerned, but not frightened. "Thunder in the distance feels connected," she told Jake. "Not just to me, but to others. Like threads of light reaching across the stars." At that moment, all the enhanced creatures in the hall turned their heads in the same direction. As one, they looked toward the main viewing portal that showed the space around the station. Their glowing intensified, and for the first time since the phenomenon began, keeper of forgotten songs, spoke. "They are coming," it said in a voice that sounded different somehow. Deeper, more resonant, as if multiple voices were speaking together. "Who's coming?" Jake asked. Before anyone could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Through the viewing portal, Jake could see lights moving in the darkness of space. Not ships, but something else entirely. High Arbiter Vex Prime Alpha's voice echoed through the station's communication system. "All beings remain calm. We are detecting an unprecedented phenomenon. Unknown entities are approaching the station." Jake pressed against the viewing portal and gasped. The lights weren't separate objects. They were patterns, like the ones he had seen on Thunder in the Distance's scales, but enormous and moving through space itself. They looked like living constellations, beautiful and impossible. "What are they?" whispered Ambassador Kane. Keeper of Forgotten Songs stood up on its examination platform, its fur blazing with light. When it spoke, its voice carried clearly throughout the entire hall, even though it wasn't speaking loudly. "They are us," the Memory Keeper said. "They are what we were before we forgot how to sing together." Around the hall, other enhanced creatures began to speak in unison, their different voices blending into a harmony that made Jake's skin tingle. Long ago, before the Great Forgetting, all minds touched all minds across the star ocean. Companion creatures carried the songs between species, weaving connections that made the galaxy whole. Jake looked around in amazement. The enhanced Flamehearts, Memory Keepers, Floating Companions, and dozens of other species were all speaking together, telling the same story in perfect synchronization. The ancient networks failed when fear built walls between the star children. The companion creatures lost their voices. The songs became whispers, then silence. Dr. Carter was frantically recording everything, her eyes wide with scientific excitement and terror. "Jake, I think your treatments didn't just heal individual creatures. I think you awakened something that's been dormant for thousands of years." The light patterns outside the station grew brighter and more complex. They weren't threatening. They felt welcoming, like seeing old friends after a long separation. "Human Jake Morrison," Keeper of Forgotten Songs said, its voice returning to normal. "Your gift of healing without barriers has awakened the old network. We can hear the ancient songs again." "I don't understand," Jake said. "What network?" "Before. Your species knew the stars. Companion creatures served as living bridges between minds across the galaxy. We carried thoughts, emotions, and knowledge between species, creating a web of understanding that prevented wars and fostered cooperation." Bladesinger of Dawn looked stunned. "The old legends speak of a time when all warriors could feel each other's honor across any distance. We thought they were just stories." "The stories were memories," Thunder in the Distance said, its scales pulsing in rhythm with the lights outside. "Memories of when the galaxy was truly united." High Arbiter Vex Prime Alpha entered the medical bay, his stone features showing more emotion than Jake had ever seen. "The entities outside are not hostile. They appear to be old friends, very old friends. They are the network nodes," Keeper of Forgotten Songs explained. "The enhanced creatures who transcended physical form long ago, waiting for the network to reawaken." Jake sat down heavily on a nearby chair, overwhelmed by the implications. "So when I treated sick animals, you removed the barriers that kept us isolated," the Memory Keeper finished. "Your healing reconnected us to the galaxy's original neural network." We are all nodes in a vast web of consciousness that spans the stars. Through the viewing portal, the light patterns began to pulse in a rhythm that felt familiar and comforting. Jake realized he was humming along, a melody he had never heard before, but somehow knew by heart. The galaxy was remembering how to sing together, and it had all started with a veterinarian from Ohio who couldn't stand to see animals suffer. But Jake was beginning to understand that this was just the beginning. If the network was truly awakening after thousands of years of silence, what would that mean for every species in the galaxy?